and welcome to this episode of John's Motorcycle Rescue and Review. Today I've got a really fun back-to-back classic muscle bike comparison for you. We'll be looking at Suzuki's mighty 1983 GS1100E, and we'll be riding this bike back-to-back with Kawasaki's 1985 Eliminator 900. These bikes were really two generations of motorcycles. Suzuki's GS1100E is really considered by many to be the pinnacle of the UJM, the Universal Japanese Motorcycle. It was a motorcycle that you could get on, you could ride it cross country, you could take it to the drag strip, you could do touring on it, you could run some back roads, and it did all of those things very, very well. It has a very roomy cockpit, and it was a comfortable bike. One of the magazine articles that was written about the Suzuki at the time of its debut said that it was a really, really nice bike that just happened to be fast. On the other hand, Kawasaki's 1985 Eliminator 900 was really made in the beginning of the specialization of motorcycles. As such, it is a more focused motorcycle. It was designed for a more limited range of riding, and it also incorporates new features that were coming out at the time, including liquid cooling. It also has a hydraulic clutch. On paper, there's a lot of similarities between these two bikes. Both of these bikes have big dual disc brakes up front, acted on by big single piston calipers. They both have air-assisted front forks. They also have conventional suspension units in the back with the swing arm and the dual shocks. Both of these bikes have compression damping adjustment on there. These bikes are both running big inline 4-cylinder 16-valve motors. They were both designed for speed and really to give a nice rush of power at any RPM range. They both have relatively comfortable seating positions on them, and they're both considered to be standard style motorcycles. There are some notable differences between these two bikes. Starting at the front suspension, the Suzuki has anti-dive on that, and so when you actually hit the brakes on the front of the bike, it increases the compression damping on your forks, and supposedly that helps you not dive in the corners as you're braking for the corners. It helps keep the front end of the bike more level. In reality, it just makes your front brakes a little bit softer, and there's not a whole lot of noticeable compression difference in the forks. It was a feature that a lot of manufacturers used at the time and then kind of gravitated away from. The 1100cc motor in the Suzuki is an air-cooled unit. The transmission is a 5-speed on the Suzuki, and the final drive on the Suzuki is chain final drive, and this bike actually features an aluminum box section swing arm as well. Looking at the Kawasaki, it has a liquid-cooled motor, and this motor was based on the motor found in the Ninja 900. It was tuned for more low-end and mid-range power. The Kawasaki features a slick-shifting 6-speed transmission, and the final drive on this Kawasaki is shaft final drive. Both of these bikes are running big single-disc brakes out back with a big single-piston caliper acting on them. The Eliminator was designed for driving excitement. The stance on the Eliminator is long and low, and so it's really easy to get a good hard launch off the line without the bike wheeling on you. The Eliminator also features a tiny gas tank. The gas tank is so small, in fact, that I have hit reserve on this motorcycle at 65 miles. So it is a very limited range on the Eliminator, and that is one of the biggest complaints about this bike. It really keeps this Eliminator from being a great all-around motorcycle, a bike that you could ride and do a little bit of touring on. The seating position is comfortable. It's limited on legroom for taller riders, but it's really a nice place for shorter riders. All right, enough talk. What are these bikes like to ride back to back? What are they like out on the road? I'm gonna gear up, I'll bring the camera along, let's find out together. Let's ride.
I am currently riding Kawasaki's 1985 Hooligan bike. It is their 900 Eliminator, and I'm riding this back to back with Suzuki's GS1100E. It just effortlessly accelerates. It's got such a great stock sound from the stock exhaust. I'm not sure how Kawasaki got away with these. They're loud compared to most stock exhausts, and they just sound awesome. The seat on this bike is nice and flat. And first impressions are, this is just a nice, easy bike to ride. The handling is not nearly so odd as the long and low stance would indicate. And that smooth power is just addictive. It's really nice. This motor is just so eager to rev. The slick shifting 6-speed transmission just goes up so nicely through the gears. Shift effort is easy. And even though this bike has a 6-speed transmission, it's revving right around 4,000 RPM at 60 miles an hour. The brakes on this bike are excellent for the time period. I haven't had to upgrade these to the steel braided lines, and they still give really nice power and feel. It really is a shame that the gas tank on this bike does not have more capacity. This bike is such a nice place to be. The seating position is very comfortable. The only odd thing is your knees are splayed out a little bit and kind of hit on the metal frames that are protecting the engine. It's not something I really notice that much while I'm riding this bike. I am currently riding Suzuki's GS1100E back to back with Kawasaki's mighty Eliminator 900. And I'm struck right off the bat with a couple of things. One, this bike is a little bit roomier than the Eliminator. I've put a little bit lower bars on this bike just to fit me a little better. The US bars really have you sitting upright in the wind, and it's very difficult to ride at highway speeds like that. Both of these bikes are revving right at 4,000 RPM indicated at 60 miles an hour. So the gearing, even though the Kawai's a 6-speed, is almost identical. The seat on this bike is much more long distance comfortable than the one on the Kawasaki, and it's flat, so I can move around quite a bit if one position gets old, which I'm just locked in on the Kawasaki seat and can't move around. So after about half an hour, it starts to wear a little thin. Suspension wise, both of these bikes have a nice ride. They're well controlled, they're not harsh. In the braking department, the Eliminator actually has a little bit of an advantage, and I think most of that is just due to the fact that this bike has the anti-dive, and that soaks up some of the brake lever travel, and so the brake lever crispness is just not as nice on this bike as it is on the Eliminator. I definitely sit higher on this bike, and it goes into corners very nicely. This bike really gets up to speed quickly. One thing that this bike does is it sits up a little bit more on the suspension. It kind of rears back when you really get on it. Another huge difference is that the tank on this bike is much narrower than on the Kawasaki, and then this doesn't have the engine guards, and so my knees are much closer together. They're not splayed out like they are on the Eliminator. Riding this bike is not shifting intensive. It just has smooth pickup, awesome pickup. On a tight back road, the Suzuki transitions in the corners easier. I think with it being a little bit taller, it would probably have a little bit more cornering clearance than the Eliminator, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm never going to drag hard parts on either of these bikes. The transmissions on both of these bikes just shift beautifully. They're very positive in their gear engagement. It's always easy to tell that it went into gear, and I don't miss shifts on either bike. Besides the brakes, the Kawasaki also has the edge in engine smoothness. I definitely get a little bit more vibration through the handlebars on this Suzuki. Comfort-wise, really the only drawback on this Suzuki is a little bit of buzz through the handlebars. I would say clutch pull is also lighter on the Kawasaki, definitely. As far as the character of the bikes goes, even though this Suzuki is very, very capable in a straight line, it's a very capable performer, it really doesn't pressure you to go fast, and it's not a hooligan bike in the same way that the Eliminator is. That Eliminator, man, every time I get on it, it's one of those bikes that kind of begs you to rip it up. And while this bike is really nice, it does have that performance on tap, but it's a much more comfortable all-day machine. It's a much more versatile machine. It's a bike that you can really get out and ride longer distances on in comfort. and it's fitting that this is considered to be the pinnacle of the UJM.
All right, man, what a lot of fun. Getting out and riding these bikes back to back, you can really feel that they were designed to different criteria when they were produced. This Kawasaki is just a hooligan bike. It's ready to go all the time. It has such a willing motor. It's so smooth up through the power, and it just begs you to get on it and to rip around. When you add in some pretty decent period brakes and a slick shifting transmission and fairly well-controlled suspension, that bike really acquits itself well when you're being a hooligan or if you're even doing some mild sport riding. And I'm surprised every time I ride one of these, I think they actually handle pretty well given the long and low stance of the bike. It takes getting used to. It's more stable than a bike like this, and it doesn't kind of flick from side to side as easily. It handles nicely through a set of corners if you ride it accordingly. If the ride gets a little bit longer, however, the thin padding on the seat and a seating position that really locks you in one place starts to get old after about half an hour or so. But even more than that, it's the limited range on the Eliminator that keeps it from being a serious daily driver. If you've never ridden one of these Eliminators, they are a unique experience in motorcycling. I've never ridden another bike that feels quite like these do. They just have such a edgy feel to them, a fun feel, and they really are a neat machine. They're one of those bikes that just puts a smile on your face every time you ride it. And that brings us to this Suzuki. Every time I ride one of these big Suzukis, I'm just pleasantly surprised. They're such a nice place to be. They're such a nice all-around motorcycle. They've got great suspension, and I would say it's actually on the plush side versus the sporty side. And so if you want to really hammer these in the corners, I would definitely suggest going to firmer springs and doing some work to the suspension there, and even getting a little bit firmer shocks in the back as well. But for a daily rider, this thing is just fantastic. And really the only fly in the ointment comfort-wise is that bit of buzz that you get through the handlebars. Now I'm running some grips that have no padding in them. If I went to a little bit softer grips, that would probably eliminate some of the buzz as well. This Suzuki is a kind of bike that if you only had one bike in the garage, man, this would be just a terrific pick. I think in this contest, I'm going to give it the nod just because it has such a broad range of riding appeal. And for me, the Eliminator is a little bit limited in the types of riding that I can do. It really wouldn't make a great daily driver because of the limited range, but man, is it a fun place to be. It's a hoot to ride, and it's definitely a hooligan bike. All right, I'd love to know what you guys think. If any of you out there are Kawasaki Eliminator 900 fans, please let me know in the comment section below. Likewise, if you are a Suzuki GS1100E fan, please give me a shout out. Let me know what you think of this comparison. As always, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative. And until next time, enjoy the ride.